The last part of the chapter, we're going to look at some methods of heat transfer. And what we have are conduction, convection, and radiation. With conduction, this occurs through direct contact. So an example in this diagram here would be this person holding the handle of the pot. So they are in direct contact with that handle. They can feel heat transfer through that direct contact. Convection. This involves fluids. It can also involve gases as well, but the example in this diagram is the water because it's a liquid. What we have are the liquid molecules at the bottom of the pan are heating up faster than the molecules at the top. So this water at the bottom is actually warmer initially. How does it make the rest of the water warm as well? Well, since these molecules are in contact with each other, they are transferring their heat from molecule to molecule, heating up the top water as well. The last example, radiation. This is through indirect contact. So that would be the fire heating the pot. Like you don't actually have to put the pot in the fire to get the pot warm. It can actually heat up through indirect contact, through feeling that heat transfer without touching. So looking at these a little bit closer, conduction we said was heat transferred when two substances are in contact and are not moving. So this example here has a person holding a needle in a candle. Well, what happens if you hold something metal in anything that's hot? Well, that metal is going to heat up as well. It has a low specific heat, as we saw in that specific heat table. So the temperature of that needle is going to be raised very quickly. With your hand in contact with that needle, you're going to feel that heat transfer through that direct contact. Another example is warm feet on a cold floor. If you get up in the mornings and it's a little bit of a chilly day, you can feel the cold floor beneath your feet, and your feet are actually transferring heat from your feet to the floor. That's why your feet get colder and the floor gets warmer. Insulation can also slow the transfer of that heat conduction. It's often the reason why socks or slippers help on a chilly morning, because by having that insulation, that heat transfer doesn't happen as quickly. In lab, for lab 13, when we are doing the experiment with the conservation of heat energy, you'll notice that we are using styrofoam cups. Fancy word for that is a calorimeter. And what that styrofoam cup acts as is insulation, so that we're not losing any heat, or at least losing less heat than we would if it was a paper cup or some other apparatus that didn't have an insulation barrier. With convection, it's the mixing of hot and cold components or fluids. So the higher temperature molecules are transferring heat to the lower temperature molecules. Now this happens most often with liquids, but it can also be gases, anything that flows. So the key here is that they're moving while they touch. So with conduction, we had two objects touching, transferring heat but not moving. With convection, we have two objects that are moving and touching and transferring heat. And it applies to liquids and gases because both liquids and gases flow. Convection stops when the temperature evens out. So the pot of water we saw in the original example, another example of this would be air conditioners or even just heat in your house. So you have hot air being pumped into your house. That hot air is mixing with the cold air, transferring that heat through those two gases touching each other but moving, evening the temperature out in your house. Radiation is the last form, and this is two substances in which neither touch or move for heat transfer to occur. So I used a fire in the original example. The example here would be the sun warming the earth. The sun is not touching the earth, yet we can feel its warmth. If the sun rays were touching the earth, we'd all be done for. So this is a form of radiation. We can feel the warmth, the heat transfer without any actual contact. Other forms are microwaves. Microwave can heat up your food without direct contact. Magnets X-rays. A fire is even another example. You can put your hands near a fire and feel its warmth, feel that heat without actually touching the fire. This last slide is just bringing together those three methods of heat transfer we talked about and just showing how they are all around us. So we have convection around the windows because we have cold air and hot air mixing together. Radiation from the fire, so no touching there, right? You can feel the fire's warmth without coming in direct contact with it. We also have conduction, so the example here being those hot logs on the floor, direct contact, both objects not moving and heat transfer occurring. And then we also have another example of convection with the hot air from the fire mixing with the cold air in the chimney.